The Russian army threw its best forces at Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, but instead of a lightning breakthrough, they ended up in a bloody meat grinder. A Ukrainian general has explicitly stated in a direct address, if the defense forces successfully maintain their defensive positions until spring, the Russian army will be both physically depleted and morally exhausted, which means the Kremlin's strategic plans to capture Donbas could be utterly and completely decimated. Well, you'll find more information in our report. My name is Yevhen Sirov, and this is the Glavred channel. Subscribe and give us a like. Let's get started. The Pokrovsk Myrnohrad agglomeration in Donetsk region is currently one of the main targets of the Russian offensive. It is here that Russia has concentrated its largest and most combat-ready group of troops. The Kremlin has made a strategic bet on this section of the front, hoping to quickly break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses and secure a significant political and military trophy. Moreover, at the end of last year, Russian propaganda was quick to announce the complete occupation of Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad. However, the reality turned out to be completely different. These statements remained nothing more than an informational bluff, unconfirmed on the battlefield. Back at the end of the summer of 24, Russian army units did indeed approach the outskirts of these cities. The situation looked extremely dangerous, but Ukraine quickly redeployed reserves, strengthened its defenses, stabilized the front, and thwarted the scenario of a rapid fall of the agglomeration. Active and extremely fierce fighting in this direction has been ongoing for a year and a half. The peak of tension came at the beginning of the fall of 25, when Russian troops managed to break through the Ukrainian defenses to the south of the agglomeration and enter residential neighborhoods. It was at that moment that the Kremlin decided victory was already within reach. At the end of October, the Russian authorities announced the supposed completion of the encirclement of Ukrainian forces in Krasnoarmysk and Dmitrov. That is how Moscow still refers to Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad, using Soviet-era toponyms. On December 1st, the Kremlin announced the capture of Pokrovsk, and right before New Year's, it claimed full control over Myrnohrad. Ukraine categorically denied these claims. The military and political leadership emphasizes certain areas of both cities remain under the control of the defense forces, and there is no talk of encirclement or complete capture of the agglomeration. This position is confirmed by OSN analysts. They draw attention to the lack of reliable evidence that the Russian Federation has full control over Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad. Indeed, part of the urban area has long turned into a so-called gray zone, where the front line is unstable, but the Russian army does not have stable dominance there. Against this backdrop, the main question sounds as tough as possible. How much longer can Ukraine withstand Russia's pressure on this section of the front? Will the armed forces of Ukraine have enough strength, reserves, and resources to continue the exhausting battles in the urban areas? The answer to this question is given by Brigadier General Yevhen Lesyichuk, commander of the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who has been responsible for the defense of Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad since the summer of 2025. In an interview with BBC Ukraine, the general states directly, the key task is to hold out until spring. According to his calculations, it is by this time that the Russian army will face a critical depletion of both personnel and equipment. The pace of the offensive will inevitably slow down. However, for now, the enemy is, on the contrary, trying to increase the pressure. As of today, Ukraine's defense forces have full control over the northern part of Pokrovsk and the north of Myrnohrad. In Pokrovsk, the enemy is acting more actively. They're trying to push northwest, aiming to reach the settlement of Grishny. According to Lesyichuk, this direction is currently the main objective for the Russians. Certain enemy units are attempting to infiltrate between Ukrainian combat positions in the north of the city, moving beyond its boundaries. However, these attempts are local in nature and do not yield lasting results. That is why, according to the assessment of the Ukrainian command, Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad may become not a trophy, but a trap for the Russian army. Russian forces are delivering a powerful strike on Vovchansk. The enemy is deliberately destroying logistics and increasing pressure on the flanks, creating a real threat to the defense of Kharkiv region. According to military analysts, the situation in the area around the city is rapidly escalating, and further developments could have a significant and lasting impact on the situation along the entire northeastern front.
And now, more information in our report. My name is Yevgen Serov. This is the Glavrachem. Subscribe and leave a like. Let's get started.
The enemy continues active combat operations in the area of Vovchansk in the Kharkiv region and its outskirts. Russian units are increasing the intensity of their attacks, systematically destroying critically important logistical routes, making it increasingly difficult for the Ukrainian defense forces to maintain a stable defense of the city and the surrounding areas. Analysts from the Deep State Project report that the enemy is actively targeting the positions of Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle operators. In particular, Russian units, which are often referred to as Rubicon crews in Ukrainian military reports, are deliberately destroying UAV launch and control points. The goal of these actions is to deprive Ukrainian infantry of aerial recognition and support, as well as to complicate the ability to respond quickly to enemy troop movements. In addition, there have been reports of small enemy assault groups infiltrating deep into defensive positions, as well as the buildup of manpower and equipment in preparation for further advances. Such actions significantly increase the risk of pressure on the flanks and create preconditions for outflanking Ukrainian positions. There has been reported enemy advancement in the areas of Sinelnikove and Segelny, as well as an expansion of the so-called gray zone around the settlement of Vilcha, where Russian forces are increasingly attempting to penetrate. Some military sources suggest that Vilcha may be under enemy control. However, this information requires further confirmation. It is also known that Russian occupiers are attempting to bypass Vovchansk, avoiding Ukrainian fortified positions in the southern part of the city. The main goal of such maneuvers is to force the defense forces to retreat, not through a direct breakthrough, but by threatening encirclement and applying systematic flanking pressure. The head of the communications department of the joint forces, Viktor Tragubov, previously emphasized that Russian troops are constantly rotating and rapidly replenishing their personnel. A key role in this is played by Vovchansk's proximity to the Russian Federation state border, which gives the enemy a logistical advantage and the ability to maintain a high pace of offensive operations. The situation is further complicated by the fact that the enemy is actively employing a tactic of total destruction of infrastructure and residential buildings. Russian forces are striking the city with guided aerial bombs and artillery, turning it into a zone of total destruction. This creates not only serious tactical problems for Ukrainian units, but also exerts tremendous psychological pressure on both the military and the civilian population. According to open sources, the enemy is also trying to bypass the city from the flanks through Vilcha, Vovchansky Hutory, and nearby settlements in order to apply pressure from several directions at once. The winter period often makes such actions easier, since frozen rivers and bodies of water are no longer a serious natural obstacle for infantry units. Ukrainian defenders, for their part, continue to hold their positions under extremely difficult conditions. The defense forces are trying to hold back the enemy, both in Vovchansk itself and on its flanks, actively cooperating with reconnaissance and adjusting artillery fire. The primary objective is to counteract and neutralize the enemy's attempts to establish a strike wedge and encircle the city halfway.